Good morning and welcome back to Mr. Meyer's classroom. Today we got another quick lesson for you guys while you're at home. This is something that you can be trying each and every day as you are reading, and it's something that as you get older you might have to be doing a little bit more as texts begin to become more difficult. Today we're going to talk about clarifying, all right? And that word clarifying, if you listen to it, you can kind of hear that word almost clear inside of it. And when something is clear to you, it means you understand it. So when you're clarifying something, think about trying to make it clear in your mind so that you can really follow along with the text. And there's a couple different ways that we can do this, but before we talk about how we do this, we always want to talk about why we do this. When you're reading a story and you're going through your character's adventures, there might be times when you don't quite understand what's going on in the story, or maybe you're a little bit lost. Sometimes it can be maybe we were reading late at night, and towards the end of a chapter, we started to maybe doze off a little bit, and the next day we go back and start to read the next chapter, and maybe it doesn't make much sense, okay? In situations like that where you are reading through your story and you do not understand what's happening, you need to slow down and clarify what's happening. And there's a couple different ways that we can do this, all right? The first example that I want to talk about is the one that's probably the most obvious, and that is just going back and rereading some of the text. If you are struggling with a book, rereading is one of the most important skills that you can bring to the table. Now, if you are struggling right off the bat, the first chapter, that's a moment when maybe you want to stop and think about if that book is at your appropriate level or not. And if you really are struggling each and every chapter of the book, it might be a chance for you to change books and find a new book. But if you've been reading through a story and you haven't been challenged too much by it yet as you get into like the later chapters, but now things aren't really making too much sense, you might have to reread parts of it and really figure it out, all right? The other one is if you are running into text that is really challenging, once again, you can always slow down and read things at a little slower pace. I know that in my experience, I have a tendency to try to speed read through things just because I get so excited that I want to try to figure out what's going to happen in the end. But when I start to speed read like that, that's when I start to make errors or start to miss small details. I've even had that moment, and maybe you're similar, where you're reading like a whole page of text, but now your brain starts to wander off and think about something else, and you realize that you get to the bottom of that page that you didn't quite understand all of that stuff. And that can happen when we're really going fast and trying to get through things instead of slowing down and taking our time to clarify what's inside of that text. If you are reading a picture book or you have one of these books that have a lot more pictures, use the pictures to help figure out what's going on. If you are reading a story and you do not quite understand, or maybe the author didn't give you a lot of details, if you can look at a picture and start to figure out what's going on in that part of the story, or maybe the author has added extra actions or emotions into that picture that they don't have written in the text. This is very common if you are doing graphic novels. So when you are reading graphic novels, you really want to make sure you're paying attention to what's going on in the pictures, because sometimes the authors can be telling the story through the pictures as much as they can with the words. One that goes back to a lot of our predictions and inferencing that we talked about is using your own life experiences to help figure things out. If you're thinking about why a character did something, or maybe you're thinking about why something happened in a story, you want to go back and try to think about things that have happened in your life to help you clarify maybe why a character's acting a certain way, or why the author made certain choices in the books as well. The last one, and I always try to make sure that students are trying to be as independent as possible, but if you're inside a reading group or something like that, and you are starting to really run into problems, that's when you need to ask for help. If you're inside a book club, maybe you can ask one of the members of the book club for help. If you're inside a classroom setting and your teacher's not working with a small group, maybe you can ask them for help one-to-one. Or even if you want to ask, can I join this small group? That might be a good possibility of things that you can do. Asking for help should usually be your last line of answering or of trying to figure this stuff out, because we always want to try to be independent and handle our own problems on our own as best we can. But when we get to a point where maybe we just can't do it, that's when we raise our hand and ask for help. The other thing is, I don't want you to think that you just have to do one of these things. If you're really struggling with the book, you can try to use a little bit of each of these strategies, because sometimes maybe one strategy will work for you in the book, and sometimes maybe another one won't. So you really want to pay close attention, and if you need to, try multiple things to help you out. That's all for today. You can practice this each and every day inside your books, going inside your own head and asking yourself some of these questions, rereading some of the text. And something I always suggest is, if you have a notebook with you and you start getting confused, maybe just take a couple notes of what's going on in the story and see if you can kind of piece it back together. That's all for me. Have a great day.